Welcome to day 2 of Apparel New York. We're really honored to have VNTANA leading one of our think tanks on how to create a winning 3D strategy. And they're going to be coming on in just a few seconds. Before then, as I mentioned, these are meant to be interactive. So please do have your camera feeds on now, if you can. And also, if you do want to speak or ask anything, please feel free to. However, when you're not speaking, please have your mics on mute to limit background noise. I'm going to be on the call throughout, but as soon as my intro is done, I will go on mute my side. But if you do need any help with anything or you want to ask me anything at all, please use the chat function. So I think with that, I will welcome our 3 hosts to join us on camera. Ashley, Ben, and Miriam. Perfect. There you are. So more people keep on joining, as I said, so we're up to a few more now, but I will hand it over to you, and anything you need in the meantime, just let me know.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. PI Apparel LA was the last real conference I went to in person, so it was awesome. But yeah, I'm Ashley Crowder. I'm the co-founder and CEO of VNTANA, based in Los Angeles. We make it really easy to take existing manufacturing design files and instantly share them with every stakeholder who can make comments, even if they're not a 3D person. And we automatically provide all of the files needed for e-commerce, social media, wherever you need these to fit all the various formats. I'm with my co-founder, Ben Conway. Let him introduce himself.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, I'm co-founder and COO. I spend a lot of time working with our clients in the apparel industry, like Adidas. So just excited to be here.
Awesome. And then we've got Miriam from Verizon. We're part of the Verizon 5G lab, and we've been working with her and her team on just, all the amazing things that 5G is starting to enable with 3D. And I'll let her kind of introduce herself as well. She's also based in LA, so it's early.
Hi, everyone. I'm Miriam. As you can see, the sun is literally rising behind me. Like Ashley said, I work at Verizon on the 5G Labs partnerships team, and I am sort of a non-3D person, like Ashley and Ben are the 3D people, and I'm representing the non-3D client. So I'll go into sort of our work with VNTANA later, but super excited to be here.
Awesome. So I know it's almost 7. We'll give it 1 more minute. I see a lot of people joining. I don't know if we could do a poll. If you are if you're on the 3D team and creating 3D designs, could you give me like a clap reaction? All right, Johnny, Isaac, cool. Thank you. I'm sure there's a few more. It's the reactions in the bottom right. Awesome. Margarita as well. Great. Very cool. Yeah, I know we work really closely with Chloe and Browzwear and Optitex, who are usually also here and doing different presenting. It's definitely a collaborative effort. All right, since it's 7, I'm going to share my screen. And yeah, feel free to ask questions in the chat. And we're definitely going to leave time to have kind of more of a conversation at the end. So we want to talk today about how to create a winning 3D strategy. 3D is no longer an option. It is driving real ROI. According to McKinsey, COVID has launched us 5 years into the digital future. What used to be a nice to have is now a must have. And 3D is such a better way to create a more engaging consumer or B2B experience and create better workflows across your organization. Companies like Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook have invested billions of dollars in enabling 3D and AR. So the infrastructure is really there. And everything Verizon and all of the network carriers are doing with 5G is really starting to enable this too. I know Miriam, I don't know if you have more thoughts to say on that 5G piece.
Yeah, should I give a little intro to 5G in retail now?
Yeah.
Great, cool. So to intro myself a little bit, like I said, I work on the 5G Labs team, and the lab is a physical place, like a sandbox. So we have 7, I think 6 or 7 around the world. Our one international one is in London. And what we do is we build co-creation opportunities. So essentially what we're trying to do is actually, lead to productization. So we sit in the tech and product org. So this is where we met Ashley and Ben, who are already far along the way of, productization. So definitely further than some of our other partners. But essentially, what we're trying to explore is exactly this. What are those use cases? What will 5G supercharge and disrupt? So when we're talking specifically about retail, it's really going to uproot the entire industry. And Ashley spoke about one. The 3D component is honestly just one component. So it's going to make everything faster, more reliable, more device inclusivity, more data allowed. So specifically for this presentation, there's the AR, VR, 3D component. How can we totally just change how customers interact with the stores, with the products? So that's going to look like maybe digital displays, AR, VR in the store and at home. You'll see stores are already doing that already, like Walmart Plus, IKEA, where you can insert, and I know we'll talk about this later, you can insert objects into your physical space using AR. But it's also going to just, totally change other things like supply chain. Can I see where the package and the products are along the route? And then advertising, and then inventory, being able to in real time check in stores and see what's low, use customer maps, heat maps to determine where are people spending more of their time, which will of course decrease loss and increase potential profits, and actually just stacking the store with things that people want to see. So that's just a really brief high level thing, description, but essentially it is we will be able to be on our phones all the time, downloading and uploading really data intensive, graphic intensive experiences. And so the VNTANA case study that I'll go into a little bit later was just one in our exploration. This is all very nascent. So, we're really trying to push it to its limits right now. And of course, 5G has just sort of blown up in the last couple of weeks, at least from the Verizon end. So we're really trying to, I think VNTANA was far ahead of the curve of us, honestly, but we're really trying to be ahead of the curve and show people, what the possible is before they even fully understand.
And to your point, and I think that's what's so important, is it's across the entire value chain that you should be thinking about 3D and how 5G is enabling that. And so it's streamlining from design and manufacturing all the way to the consumer, which is what makes it so exciting. And of course, if you're talking about the consumer, organizations like Shopify have already proven, 3D is increasing sales. Their studies have shown it's doubling online conversions and reducing returns by 40%, which is pretty massive. But it's not just consumer, right? B2B showrooms have gone digital, which has been a huge help during this time of COVID where people can't travel. And it's also been helping to reduce samples. We heard yesterday, I don't know who caught Lee and Feng's talk, they've actually have reduced their number of physical samples, replacing them with digital and 3D. We're also working with a company called Mesh One that does a lot of product testing, and they're starting to replace physical samples with digital and still being able to do this product testing, which is really cool because not only does that decrease cost, increase speed to market, it also reduces carbon footprint, which I know everyone, in this industry is always worried about and thinking about improving. And lastly, consumers want AR shopping. This was a study that came out this year, and there's actually 83 million consumers using AR monthly. Which is really high. It was a lot higher than I was expecting. So I was excited about that. And 61% of consumers prefer retailers who offer AR. And 40% of consumers would actually pay more for a product that they could customize in AR. So that's huge, right? It's real value to the bottom line. So this is why, your sales and marketing team is asking you for all these 3D files and all these different formats. And part of that is because they're wanting to use it across social channels like Facebook. Facebook has actually become the largest AR platform, which a lot of people don't realize. They have 1.2 million effects and over 400,000 creators using Spark AR. And it's a great way to for different sales and marketing teams to dip their toe, because with Spark AR, they have these pre-built filters. Last night, I actually created a hat try-on that you all get to test out with a hat that was made in Browzwear. but it's pretty massive. And then you also have Google Swirl. Google has launched their 3D ads. So if you type in search, you could actually have a 3D version of a product pop up on Google. And they've seen 3 times higher engagement, 34% increase in exposure time, and a 17-point increase in consumer purchase intent. Again, it's a really massive increase to the bottom line. And so I think whoever is adopting this for this holiday season is going to be doing pretty well. We're working really closely with Google, just like we are with Verizon, on helping streamline, again, this process of getting these 3D assets into it, because everyone has their own requirements. I'm sure you all have experimented with the Snap camera that's integrated with Zoom. So it's not just the Snapchat app anymore. You can actually create filters with Zoom, Twitch, Google Hangouts, all across different platforms. It's very, very similar to Facebook's Spark AR. So if you learn one, you can really do the other. And then you've got game engines. So the 2 big game engines are Unity and Unreal, as I'm sure many of you know. We work really closely with both. With Unity, they are the creator of over 50% of mobile games, 60% of all AR VR is built on Unity. Tony Parisi from the ad group there is actually giving a talk later today. His ad network reaches 1.9 billion devices, and we're working with them to be able to have these ads in 3D, again, automated and streamlined from those design files. And then with Unreal, there's a number of different companies out there that are building some incredible showrooms that really look super photorealistic. But again, it's, how do you just easily get those design files there? And the last thing I want to touch on just about the future and kind of where this all is going before we get into the nitty gritty is, I love this talk that the CEO of Levi's did last year, just talking about how sizes are going to go out the window 10 years from now. Consumers are going to want to custom design their own products. And with the advent of 3D printing, it'll be able to be make to order. So there won't even be physical products to take photos of for the website. Like everything is going to be 3D across that entire value chain, which I think is really cool to think about. And we're already starting that transition now. Now, the problem, right, because it's not that easy, is the disparate file requirements. So even though GLTF, is quickly becoming the standard, we're part of the Kronos group. We're pushing that forward as a standard. And I know a lot of the different programs you might work with might export a GLTF or GLB. The problem is there's still different requirements for size limit, polygon count, textures, and texture size. So this is kind of a snapshot of what the different ad networks and social networks I talked about require. We actually have a full one-pager. So if you reach out to me after, happy to send it over to you. Our team did a lot of work finding and getting all these requirements together. So at VNTANA, we've tried to make this easy because we saw companies recreating the same 3D file over and over again with slightly different textures and size limits, and hiring agencies to create a Facebook app over here while the 3D team over here had a file already. And it ends up being, a nightmare, right? You're creating things all over the place. And so instead, we wanted to create a cohesive 3D strategy. So there was one single source of truth 3D file that was used across the entire value chain. And so with our platform, you can upload your existing design files from Browzwear, Clo, RomansCAD, etc. And we automatically process them. So we're giving you all of the file formats that you need for Google, Snapchat, Facebook, digital showrooms, game engines, wherever you need it. And any stakeholder can log in, leave comments, view the 3D file. They don't need to be a 3D artist and have access to the programs. This is all possible through our patented algorithms that help fix issues in 3D files and automatically optimize them. So companies like Adidas that we work with, what used to take them 6 weeks, they did with our software in 1 hour. We automated with 2,000 shoes. So it's really helping save people a lot of time. And with that, because I gave Miriam access to ours, I'll let her talk about what we did with Riot and Verizon and Dignitas.
Great. So if everyone wants to, and I will as well, just to make sure we're good to go, pull up the QR code on your cell phone. So, okay, leads to the store. Perfect. So I don't know who is an esports gaming fan here, but one of the cool things about the 5G lab in Los Angeles is that we have an actual professional esports team sitting in our lab. So we are their West Coast HQ. The team is Dignitas. They're not as big as 100 Thieves or, FaZe Clan, but that's actually part of the beauty. And I'll get into that, how their small size allowed us to experiment with 3D and AR. So if you click on the QR code, you'll see essentially we wanted to do a variety of activations with Dignitas. We have this gaming team here. We really want to use them as a validation channel. What is actually native to players and coaches and staff? What will actually, disrupt, like we always use that word, disrupt or just flip the gaming industry on its head that will actually feel native and intuitive to the players in the community? Because the last thing we want to do is have Verizon come in as this big behemoth, tech company and just sort of say we know gaming and really mess the whole thing up and be the laughing stock. So we needed to make sure that what we were doing was native, intuitive, additive to the game. And, gamers are really, really used to graphic intensive, high fidelity photo real experiences. So we needed to make sure that what we were doing was actually still cool for arguably some of the cooler people around, So we worked with VNTANA, and mainly what we wanted to do was to ask the question, how might Dignitas leverage immersive content? So 3D, AR, VR, all that stuff. How might Dignitas leverage this immersive content, merchandising, and transactions to really drive engagement and traffic to the site, to their specific Dignitas store Shopify site? And we're doing this in a variety of ways, but the first thing we wanted to test was to 3Dify, I don't know if there's a better verb, to 3Dify some of the Dignitas existing physical merch from their site, put the 3D assets on the site and do an A/B test and really see how are these pieces of merch performing when they're in 3D versus the regular, 2D images that are appearing on the site. And you'll see the VNTANA assets really blew everyone away. If you zoom in, which you can do, the stitching is just incredible. So this was already, just from an aesthetic point, we get a lot of, anecdotal feedback that this was really cool and something that people had not seen before. And like I said, Dignitas is relatively small, so they don't have the merch numbers of a FaZe Clan, which is a huge merch sort of industry, but that worked towards our advantage. We were really able to kind of take their relatively, small numbers and play with it and actually experiment, like I was saying. So essentially what we did is we 3Dified 4 assets. I believe it was, actually we did more, we did like 10, but for this experience, I think we did just a handful of them. You'll see here, if you click on it, I believe the hat is the first one. So we have a couple hats and a couple pieces of, a jersey and shirts. Moving forward, we're very interested in this as part of the insights. They have other things that we did not make 3D. And so I'll go into this a little bit, but sort of what we choose to make 3D, we were sort of just winging it based on, what we heard, what were their popular items or their new items, but thinking through more explicitly, if you're not going to 3D every object, which we couldn't given, the small size and the relatively small amount of money that we were working with, which objects do you 3D? Which objects do you actually want to highlight in that way? So that was one question that we came up with. But you'll see here, essentially, we had 4 different objects and we had one image that said 3D on it. So it didn't replace, the other stock images that they had. And that was important for us. We wanted people to be able to have the traditional experience in addition to the 3D. And for the A/B test purposes, we put, the VNTANA 3D logo next to all of the images on the catalog. So you could really see when you first went onto the catalog page, which ones were 3D. And so we were hoping that would sort of jumpstart an excitement and intrigue and maybe get people to go to the objects. Should I talk, Ashley, I'll talk about some of the insights and learnings?
Yeah, because I think what was so interesting is the revenue comparison of like this week test versus like all last quarter.
Exactly. So like I said, a couple of times at this point, the data pool was pretty small, and we knew that this was going to be a constraint, and we knew that it was not going to be this huge scale, hundreds of thousands of dollars that we might have been able to get in another circumstance. But we were really excited with the results we found and the insights already just from, throwing a couple of VNTANA objects up there. And I can actually talk to sort of the process of creation because VNTANA made it super seamless. And like I said, I am not a 3D person and most people on my team are actually non-technical. And so I'm not that familiar with the file formats and everything, but the actual process of making the 3D objects, super simple within a couple of days or so, because we're not as time crunched as some of these other companies. So it was a lot of back and forths, but like you said, actually, it could be even quicker than that. And so there were a couple really interesting insights that we found. The first one in studying the Shopify data and analytics was that the amount of sales that they got during those 7 days that we studied from when we launched, did the social efforts around these 3D assets and when we launched the 3D assets formally on the site until, 7 days later, that the amount of sales exceeded all sales in Q3, the whole previous quarter by almost double. So it's not necessarily a cause and effect. Again, the data pool was pretty small. So we will want to test this again and test it in a variety of different ways. But we were really shocked by that. Dignitas was definitely shocked by that. They saw sales in a week that they, obviously hadn't seen in 3 months, but beyond that, I think we're really blown away. So that was huge. And the implications of that are huge. And there's a lot I think moving forward, we want to take qualitative and sort of anecdotal research and really understand what was it about the 3D? Was it that you could play with it? Was it that it looked different? Was it that they'd seen it on social and it was a QR code, which is a different way of entering the site? So that, there's a lot of sort of different conclusions that we might be able to draw from this, but that was a really impressive stat for us. And then another one that was super interesting was that returning customers were higher. So these are people who visit the site, leave, and then come back. And again, we can't necessarily make inferences, but that is definitely something that we wanted to explore. And I'm someone who's relatively new to, data and insight collection. I worked with our strategy team on this. So Tiffany, the woman on my team that I worked with, said, especially if your data pool is really small, it counts for insights and analysis if you are just getting more questions. So one question that we got from this is, what is the pull? What is it about 3D that is bringing people back? And I'm sure Ashley and Ben might be able to speak a little bit more to that concretely, but that was something that was very interesting to us. So why did these customers return to the site? Was it just that they forgot to buy something, or was it that they had seen some 3D object or maybe saw it on social later and wanted to come back and explore? So that's something we would definitely want to test. And there are a lot of other insights, but another one that was super interesting is, and I'll just finish with this, and this is a question that was posed to us. So I'm sure Ashley and Ben have a lot of insights about, if you can 3D everything in your inventory, what would be the most logical sort of revenue driving 3D-ification. And so what we found is that we actually 3D'd the most popular items. We 3D'd the jerseys and the t-shirts and the hats. And actually what we were finding is that the things that were getting, the highest sales were actually coming from the smaller, cheaper items. So the phone accessories or the keychains. So that got us thinking, are these new customers? Are these people who maybe can't afford the price point of these 3D objects, but saw the 3D and came to the site? So thinking, was this just totally new customer acquisition and new growth for the site? And the traffic far exceeded anything on the site that they'd seen before. So one can make that inference theoretically. So again, just thinking, might we try to 3Dify different objects, or can we somehow use 3D to push people to buy these more expensive items? So we were really sort of blown away by those conclusions and really excited. And this is just the first step in our overall immersive commerce strategy, where we're really just how can esports specifically really leverage this content to just create totally new revenue channels?
Right. And that's why I think it's so exciting that we worked with you guys with an esports team, because esports is taking off. That is becoming so huge. Louis Vuitton sponsored League of Legends tournament last year. It had a physical trophy, but what we're talking about with a lot of these game engines is product placement in game. Just like you have product placement in movies, when my nephew tuned into the Fortnite Travis Scott concert, he should have been wearing the pair of tennis shoes he had just been looking at online. And being able to have a 3D file of all of your assets across the value chain will start to allow these types of experiences really easily. And I think with Miriam and your team, excuse my selfie. I made this last night, but you guys use the 3D assets across all the different channels you could. So, including like Facebook and Instagram. So if you follow VNTANA Live, this will actually pop up in your filters. If you want to try it, you can try on the hat. But I'm going to let Ben give a demo of oh, there we go. Here's a video. I'll give a demo of like how we were able to easily create all the 3D assets for all these different channels. So I'm going to stop sharing really quick.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, so going back to kind of the theme of this talk is we introduced some new technologies that you may or may not be aware of. The change of pace is accelerating really, really fast, right? And so the other thing that we really understand is that oftentimes when you look at a program like Clo or Browzwear, we talk about 3D a lot, but essentially what's happening is pattern making that gets stitched together in a 3D model. And once that 3D model lives, leaves Browzwear or Clo or Optitex, we find that it's kind of a mystery what happens after it as far as what's happening with like these different parts of 3D. And so what we tried to do when we were building this platform was automate the processes that might normally need to be handled by a 3D artist, might normally need to be handled by an external agency or internal agency, and see how can we make that simpler. So this is a view you might see when you log into the platform. All these files came out of Browzwear or Clo in this case, but we also support Optitex. On the left-hand side, you can actually have individual clients. So different product lines, or we actually have a freelance design program where we've given access to freelance designers for free, encouraging them to start sharing with brands in a different way, because we're finding that a lot of communication on 3D files happens on 2D screenshots. And we don't think that's a very good way to be doing business. So let's jump into one of these assets right here. So this is a dress that came out of Browzwear. You can see that when the dress came out of Browzwear, it started out as 192 megabytes. And this is a pretty typical asset. There's nothing particularly special. This is a very simple dress that has come out of Browzwear. And this is one of the things that we're finding with 3D programs is they're not particularly efficient when they export. So what needs to happen for collaboration is those file sizes need to be reduced. And so what our automation algorithms do is they reduce the file sizes via polygon decimation and also texture compression and texture resizing. The reason that's important is that if you're looking at a style zone, if you're looking at a close set, something like that, number one, it only addresses, okay, this is all my stuff from Browzwear, but if you're a larger brand, it doesn't address, hey, we've got some stuff from Clo, hey, we've got some stuff from Moto and Roman's CAD with shoes, we've got some scans, so it's a little bit fragmented. But number two, you're still loading a massive file size. You're loading that original file size out of there. So this went from 138,000 polygons down to 64,000. And the GLB, you might also hear GLTF. GLB is just a variant of that, is the version that actually gets loaded into a viewer. So we've reduced that file size. Over here, we make it really easy to embed this. So if you want to embed it on a personal website, if you want to embed it for e-com, if you want to embed it in a digital showroom, it makes it really easy. And all of this data can get pulled via our API. We also have a JavaScript component. And so we're working with people like Hugo Boss right now that are building their own digital showroom experience. And essentially what the process looks like for them is they're coming out of Clo and they're using APIs to build the actual digital showroom. So there's some access to the platform, but a lot of this stuff can be automated. And that's kind of what we're all about, is we want to be the glue that allows you to automate across the entire organization. If I want to share this asset with a friend or send someone else for review, I can just click this share link and it'll copy that. If I jump into it a little bit more, we give you quite a bit of control. You can set the position that the asset initially starts in. We've got a bunch of different lighting looks that you can change, and we're continually updating what features are exposed there. I'd like to note that there's a lot of conversation these days about making sure that the quality is sufficient, right? Everyone's very concerned, like, hey, are we rendering this at a high enough quality for consumers? But what's happening, Ashley mentioned Unreal, Ashley mentioned Unity. Those are examples of real-time rendering. The backbone of our viewer is actually the Google viewer, which is built off of 3JS, and we wrap it with a bunch of functionality. I know that was a lot of technical language, but essentially what's happening is the largest players in tech are investing billions in real-time rendering. It's going to become table stakes for everyone else. So what's happening is people who haven't adopted 3D earlier on or figured out how are we starting to do this are going to be left behind because they're saying we got to have these renders that are perfect. That's the only way it's going to work, because what's happening is 3D real-time like rendering capabilities they're accelerating on an exponential curve, whereas traditional rendering capabilities, and there's been a lot of talk at Li and Feng and other people asking, you know, what kind of computer do I need? We hear from Browzwear users or Clo users all the time, like, oh, I gotta do a render, so I'm gonna go make lunch or something while that's rendering out. That's the beauty of real time, is that no longer is going to have to happen. So then let's jump into a feature that we really like, which is annotations. So what you're able to do here, you've probably seen stuff like this in StyleZone, or maybe Clo, but now you're doing this on a much lighter asset. So I could say, you know, at Ashley, please use ideal fastener, nylon number 4, some zipper like that, right? If Ashley updates that, she can actually tag me. She'll get a notification and say, at Ben, it's been updated. And she can upload a new version of this asset and all of the annotations will persist. So if I see that and it's good to go, I can now click resolve. So this starts to be a workflow. We're adding approval workflows so that you can have kind of different user level of access. And the reason that's important is not just on the product creation side of things. I'll talk about that in a second, but actually when you get to the marketing side of things, there's a lot of people that need to look at this before it's able to go live. And we want to make sure that all of those approvals can happen in one place. So I'm going to jump into a different asset now. That was an asset that came out of Browzwear. Let's take a look at something from Clo.
And do you mind hitting edit really quick? I just want to touch on one thing. If you hit the edit button. So when Ben talked about making it easy, and we talked about making it easy to create all these different formats. So if you hit the advanced settings drop down, you could actually, for Facebook, for example, it has to be a 50,000 polygon limit. So you could type in 50,000 there and it will automatically hit that. Also for Facebook, it has to be a 1K texture resolution. If you hit that drop down, 1K is the smallest. For Snapchat and Google, it could actually be 2K. So this is what kind of Miriam was talking about, of like how easy it was for her to look at, you know, the requirements needed for the different platforms, select which one she needed, and then hit save, and it immediately exported it out what she needed.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. So I'm not going to make any changes to there, but what I am going to show is a feature that we have called hotspots. So you can actually add hotspots to these assets. We're making these customizable. We number them for ease of use of kind of understanding what's happening with the asset. You can add text, you could add images. So if there was some inspiration, and you can even add videos. So I attached a YouTube video. You just pop the link in there. And I can click share. And if I paste that in my browser, and here's a Lululemon workout that was attached to this video. So it's a new way to share content to make it more immersive. If there's stories about sustainability, if there's stories about inspiration for design, those can now become part of the process. And so kind of what we're advocating with this entire platform is that it is total nonsense that marketing and product creation teams are as siloed as they are today. And a big barrier for that has been that the assets are too large. They are in proprietary formats. There hasn't really been an easy way to share. And so what we're trying to do is enable cross collaboration across the entire organization while still giving the individual teams what they need. And so an example of that is we're currently working on a Plm integration that will be announced in January of next year. And what we're doing is we're actually going to be embedding the viewer directly into Plm, all of the annotations. So now you're adding 3D capabilities to your Plm. So all of the activities that you were doing normally, you still have those. But the e-commerce, the marketing folks are actually able to log in through the platform, through the browser-based version, see linked products. They won't make any changes to what the data that exists on Plm, but they'll be able to generate their own versions that they need for the various places they're using these assets. So that is, I think, a pretty good comprehensive overview of the sort of things that we're doing. We can kind of get into the nitty-gritty a little bit more of how we optimize these models. But before we move on from kind of demo, are there any questions? Does anyone have any questions about how this works?
Cool.
Okay.
Please feel free to ask any questions, but I'll start sharing my screen. So get into a little bit of the magic that is happening. So we talk about optimization. So this is really what makes this all possible and happen in a few minutes versus your team spending a lot of time doing it. A lot of times, you know, we've talked about a number of file sharing programs like Optitex, Browzwear, et cetera. Whenever they get exported, I'm sure you guys know a lot of issues can happen. Normals can be flipped. There could be holes in missing triangles. There could be just tons of extra metadata inflating the file size. And so this is stuff that we went about just fixing because we saw it across the board in all of our clients over the past decade. So we invented this process called sanitization, where it automatically welds vertices. We correct polywinding and normal direction issues when they get flipped. We can change the overall scene coordinates so that it gets recentered. We actually combine meshes if they're the same and remove duplicates and just remove all types of unneeded metadata. And I think we do have, oh, nope, just checking the questions. Another thing we do is automatically convert metal roughness to specular gloss. So while a lot of these programs today will export a GLB or GLTF, sometimes the full conversion of met rough to spec gloss doesn't happen. And that can happen for a variety of reasons. So again, our process just automatically does this conversion again for you to make sure that nothing was left. The next thing we do is we crop textures. So this texture on the left is what a typical texture will look like when it's exported from one of these design programs. And again, this is because they're designed for creating that pattern. And we're not necessarily thinking about a game engine and real-time render of what you need. So we get rid of all this wasted space to, again, help reduce file size. And we're forcing it to be a power of 2, which is required in almost all game engines and social media AR platforms. We also resize textures automatically. So if you have something like a button on your design from a Browzwear or Clo, even the one single button might be a 4K texture. That button is such a tiny piece of the whole. It doesn't need to be that big because nobody can tell, right? It's too small for someone to know if that's 4K or 1K. So what our algorithm does is it actually determines how big is this one piece of the whole. And if it's a tiny percentage, it's going to crop and resize, again, to help reduce the file size automatically for you. And then, as I had Ben demonstrate, you can also compress textures. So we have a lossless version. If you want it to look exactly the same, there's literally no difference. We have lossless compression. Or if you know this is going to be for a mobile device, if you know this is going to be for Google Swirl and it needs to be really small, you can do lossy compression and change the aggressiveness from 1 least aggressive, 10 most aggressive, as well as choose the resolution of all your textures, which again, 1K is required for Facebook, 2K is required for Google and others, but it just gives you that option. And then we also do instancing. So this is something that really helps with Romans CAD. Romans CAD with the shoe, for example, the shoe has hundreds of the same exact stitch. When you export this from Romans CAD, every stitch is taking up space. So what our algorithm does is it actually discovers what are identical stitches and it removes them. So if you have 500 of the same stitch, we really only need 1 and we're going to instance and mirror it everywhere else. And so this has significantly helped reduce file size. And again, not changing anything to do with the look and the quality. Since we're just mirroring and copying that one stitch, 500 times. And then lastly is mesh decimation, which I'm sure you've heard about. You might start with 150,000 polygons, but you need to get under 50,000 for Facebook, again, for that Verizon example. So you could type that in. If you don't set a polygon limit, it'll automatically reduce in a smart way as much as it can, so it understands the shape of the object, and it's going to reduce the polygon count to the limit that our algorithm thinks looks good. But you can always override that. And then a further step we took this is with parallel geometry removal. So this Gore-Tex jacket is a great example where in your design, you're going to have multiple layers of fabric because all the different layers are really important for the design. However, if you just want a 3D version of this for a digital showroom, you only care about the outside. And every layer that's there is actually adding to file size and slowing down that experience. And so our algorithm can actually detect parallel layers and remove anything that's on the inside automatically. So again, it just helps significantly reduce that file size. So your performance is going to be that much better on web. But again, it still looks great and it looks the same. And yeah, as we said, we fit into your existing process, so you can immediately upload any files from any of these programs, and our algorithms kind of take care of any issues that we see and make it easy to distribute. And I did provide one last example. So, we drink our own Kool-Aid. We made our own Google Swirl ad. So if you scan this QR code, you can check that out. But we did want to leave a lot of time for questions. So I will leave this up, but I wanted to check the room.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of pose a question to the audience of, in your conversations around digital product creation, how often are end use cases getting discussed? And when you're looking at those, how often is it we're looking for a new way to reimagine our B2B selling experience, like showrooms? And how often is it, next Q3 next year, we want to be looking at delivering some sort of e-com experience? It'd be interesting to see where people are on their journey. Melanie, I'm going to call on you because I reached out and we had a brief conversation. So I'm curious to know.
Sure. So, working at Lands' End, we're relatively new to the 3D space. We are using Browzwear, but again, COVID has accelerated all of this. So we've trained a lot of people about now we're to what's the next step? You're right, just what you guys said. What do we do with all these 3D files? And our creative department is really looking at us to help them reduce photo samples, things like that, because things are delayed and we're not getting what we need, and they're seeing that we're getting better at creating the 3D images. So that's kind of, this has been a great presentation because it helps me, along with yourself, be able to go back to the departments that are asking for some of these things and show them that there is a solution to what they want.
That's great.
Hi, this is Pam Buckingham. I just wanted to echo that. I think often what I've heard in the industry is kind of like the wrestling between where do we start with 3D? Do we start from a product creation point of view and reducing samples? Or do we look at it from an end customer e-com point of view? And there's kind of been this wrestling as to what did you tackle first, because it seems too much to do all at once. And I love that this tool kind of would eliminate some of that wrestling, because you could look at product creation and then very easily translate those same assets into e-com experiences, AR, VR with different platforms. So I think it's amazing and a great tool for folks to be able to adopt 3D easy and be able to focus on one business process and easily take it to the next level. So amazing work.
Thanks, Pam. Yeah, that's kind of the thought process with this is not, don't get us wrong, we're actively trying to move the entire industry further into 3D and doing some more stuff that's customer facing. But the idea is, how do we fit into existing processes today without having to disrupt those workflows, make sure that things work? So oftentimes even we'll write patches, like Ashley said, fixing assets. For programs that are like, maybe they're exporting something incorrectly, we'll just write software to go ahead and fix that, so we don't have to ever slow down on the creation process, and the assets can keep getting created in that way. Have any organizations tried looking at this from so when we're talking about reducing samples, right? How about on product testing or product creation? Have any companies started looking at getting customer feedback earlier on in the process? Ashley briefly mentioned Mesh One. First Insight is another one that people might be familiar with, starting to look at leveraging designs early on before they've even been approved to start and get some feedback from large groups of people quickly.
I can answer that. We've taken a few prints for swim collection and put them out there. So they've used these styles in Browzwear, and they've recolored them to different prints they were trying out. Maybe they have 10 prints and they want to get to 5. And I'm not exactly sure how they shared it with the customers, but we have a department that works with like customers direct, and I think they chose maybe some top purchasers or purchasers of swimwear and sent it out. So that's what they did to get feedback, but they just use the 3D files, and then they probably showed them in a 2D presentation mode. So it wasn't interactive where you could turn them around.
That makes sense. One of the features that's getting added to kind of address some of that is the idea of public versus private comments. So being able to have people annotate with different levels of access, so that way when you share it out, not everyone sees everyone else's comments that exist on that model. So being able to kind of layer that, and specifically for this use case of we want to get feedback, or in PLM, maybe you're putting the same product out to 10 different people that are bidding on it to manufacture it. You don't want them to see, the competitive feedback that they've got back and forth. Does anyone have any questions that are maybe more directed towards 3D? So actually looking at these assets, I know we were using a lot of like technical terminology around 3D. Was there anything that was not understood that we were talking about with regard to that, or any questions on, hey, I've heard this, what does this mean? Really give me some more details on Unity, give me some more information on Unreal, anything like that? Okay.
We can talk a little bit more. I know, again, Tony Parisi from Unity is giving a talk in a little bit, who's great. Unity in general, I think a lot of people think is easier to kind of get up to speed. You generally need a smaller dev team to create it. Unreal in the past has been a bit more complicated, but slightly more photorealistic. People have said they're, depends on which camp you're in, but either one can be used to kind of create some of these digital showrooms. So I know there's like a lot of different companies out there working on that, but it's pretty interesting. So it's not just gaming anymore. I think we had a talk from Pixar yesterday where the whole movie industry is using game engines now, so they're kind of taking over.
I'm gonna share my screen real quick, Ashley. I want to show. I'm aware that not everyone may be actually using the QR code to access the AR experience. I'm gonna share that because this is something that a lot of the freelance designers we've been working with have been really excited about.
Yeah, it says you do that. Yeah, so we automatically generate the QR code. So you can send it to somebody and then place it in your environment. And it'll actually, because again, it's a real-time render, it's actually going to reflect the lighting in that room that you place it in. Cool.
So that experience from exporting from Clo to that is probably about 3 minutes to get that done on the platform. So there's also the ability to add bulk. So when we're looking at this, one of the things that we're trying to really make people understand is basically you're waiting for upload time, and that's about it. Once it's on the platform, it runs pretty quickly. Some other things that I might just share as insights for people that are looking to use our platform or something else. Browzwear files are generally much more efficient with polygon count. So you're usually getting much better polygon counts out of Browzwear that are lower, but they're really inefficient with textures. So every single pattern piece gets its own texture. So the files can end up being larger than the exports from Clo. On the flip side, Clo is really bad with polygon counts a lot of times. So sometimes you're getting millions of polygons for relatively simple garments, but they're much more efficient when it comes to exporting textures, although the files are still 150 megabytes, more than that. And the last point that I'll kind of speak to is what you just saw on the phone was actually 2 different file types that are being generated from the platform, and kind of see them down here, but you've got 2 different things happening. You've got your GLB, and GLB is the file that is used for all Android devices and any web-based experience. So that includes iOS if you're in Safari. So the first time when I pulled it up on mobile, I had the 3D model on my phone. That was using a GLB file. USDZ file is the file format that is proprietary for Apple. So that is what's used in all augmented reality experiences. Like when I saw the outfit in the room, that was utilizing the USDZ file. And just something to kind of understand for your own edification on this is that GLB files are generally much more efficient with regard to polygon count. So they do a better job of storing a lot of geometric data, but they do a poorer job of storing textures. USDZ is kind of the opposite of that, where they do a pretty good job storing texture data, but they do a really bad job of storing geometry data. So those are some of the things that kind of need to be considered when you're saying, hey, I want to do this experience. When you're looking at iOS versus Android, you need to really take into account both of those file types. So you kind of need to be looking at both depending on what you're doing. But what we're finding is that most people are starting out, can I just get a 3D version on the web that can be seen by everyone? Can I improve the quality? Can I have better lighting on that than what I've seen in the past? And that's kind of the starting point. And for that, you really need to worry only about the GLB file. And then when people start taking it a step further, that's when they get into USDZs.
I had a question about support of avatars. Do you also support avatars together with a garment, and can the avatar move around?
So avatar animation support is something that we will be adding to the platform. So this is a Clo avatar. One of the challenges, I would say, with avatars is less on our support and more on people wanting to see avatars that look more like people and a little bit less plastic. So I know that Browzwear has launched a couple of new avatars that are more realistic. Clo's doing the same thing. But I heard in a talk yesterday, I think it might have been Lian Feng as well, they stopped including avatars when they were showcasing it because people were turned off by the unrealistic nature of the actual avatars. So short answer is we do support it, but in general, we're finding people prefer to just have the garment, unless it's kind of a freelancer that's doing something that's a little bit more like creative, let's say.
Yeah.
Are you, Dick, are you animating avatars a lot and using those animations places?
Yes, we set up a personal fitting room, we call it, on a smartphone. Using GLTF files. So we have a GLTF for the avatar and a GLTF for lingerie. So it's about, we're a lingerie manufacturer. And we combine the 2 GLTF files in the application. Well, at the moment we use the Babylon framework for visualization. Yes, the GLTF works quite well. The problems we have is more upstream to get there are different formats that are used, and the output from Clo is sometimes not, has to be corrected, or we use Maya and some other programs to create the avatars. But once we publish it in GLTF and combine it and visualize it in Babylon, everything works perfect.
That's very cool. I think we're seeing a lot more of that, of people trying to, I think that's really going to be the step that's taken next, is how do we get avatars that look more like us, avatars that are to our sizes? Can we dress those first? Because probably once a day I get the question of, can I try the clothes on me? And I think everyone in this room, this virtual room, understands that it's enough work to just get the clothes to fit the avatar correctly first time around, let alone a person in real time. So I think we're a few years away from that, but the customization with avatars and doing those fittings is something that's interesting. We're going to be integrating a headless version of Browzwear as well. So we'll be looking at more of those capabilities, meaning you can upload an actual V-Stitcher file to the platform and we'll handle the export on our end. What's very cool about that is that we'll start to be able to script other things happening automatically in Browzwear as well. So there's more and more of those sorts of capabilities getting rolled out.
Yeah, an interesting next step we are thinking about would be to combine then the avatar with a lingerie and combine it together with outerwear. So have a nice dress, and then of course because well, we are in control of the avatar and the lingerie, but not of the upperwear. So you need to make to agree on a positioning mechanism, or so that the dress fits nicely on the avatar. Yeah. And I can imagine that if you would integrate it in your platform in a correct way, that we could get access to these kind of capabilities.
Yeah, we have the ability to set sizing and positioning already. We're working with a little bit in furniture as well. So that's a big need for them, is making sure that everything's true to size when it comes into functionality.
Great.
Any other final questions? I see Michael's showing back up, which is our cue to end things here.
Anyone else?
If you guys do have questions later, you can always email us. I'm just Ashley at VNTANA, and Ben is Ben at VNTANA. Very simple. So feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much. I was also going to say the VNTANA team also, of course, have a booth. So as soon as you jump back onto the swap card platform to watch the rest of the event, please do look out for their stand, and you can chat with them there, either chat or calls. Or of course, email them, and they've just added their emails to the chat feed. So thank you to our hosts so much. That was great. The hour flew by, so thank you so much. To everyone else, thank you for joining. We're about to start with the opening remarks, so please now make your way to the Swapcard app, and we will continue the event from there. Have a great day 2 of Apparel New York. Thanks, guys.